Ethan slowly opened his eyes. The air around him was heavy, filled with a strange smell he could not name. He was not on Earth anymore. That much he knew. The last thing he remembered was his ship, the burning metal, and the explosion in space. Now he was lying on a cold floor, inside a place that looked more like a palace than a prison. Tall walls rose around him, glowing with strange symbols. Blue lights ran through the walls like living rivers. The sound of footsteps echoed, soft but sharp. He turned his head and saw them. Alien guards, tall, silver-skinned with glowing eyes. They did not speak his language, but their stares told him everything. He was their prisoner. Then she entered. The alien princess, Zyra. Her skin was pale silver, her hair flowing like fire underwater, and her eyes burned with a cold light. She walked with the pride of someone who had never been challenged. Every step echoed like thunder in the silent hall. She looked at him and laughed. A soft laugh, sharp as a knife. "So this is the human," she said in her language, but somehow Ethan understood, as if her voice spoke straight into his mind. "This is the creature who believes in love." Her words were dripping with mockery. Ethan sat up slowly, his body weak, but his spirit unbroken. He clenched his fists, staring at her. "What do you want from me?" he asked, his voice rough. Zyra tilted her head, her smile cold. "What do I want? I want to see how long your human love will last before it breaks you." The guards laughed with her. They called humans weak, soft, foolish. Ethan stayed silent, his jaw tight. He had been through battles, he had lost friends, he had seen death many times. But this was different. This was not war, this was a game, and he was the piece on her board. Zyra stepped closer, her eyes scanning him like he was nothing more than a strange animal. "You humans fight for each other," she said, almost amused. "You bleed for each other, you die for each other, and all because of a feeling you call love." She leaned down, her face near his. "To me, that is weakness." Ethan met her eyes without fear. "Maybe to you," he said, "but for us, love is the reason we survive." The hall grew silent. For a moment, Zyra's smile faded, as if his words touched something hidden deep inside. But then she laughed again, louder this time. "Strong words for a dying man," she said. "You will learn, human, that love cannot save you here." The guards pulled him to his feet and dragged him through a shining corridor. Strange creatures stared at him as he passed, whispering in voices he could not understand. Some looked at him with pity, others with hunger, as if he was food for their curiosity. Finally, they threw him into a chamber made of crystal walls, glowing faintly in the dark. Ethan sat down, breathing hard. He closed his eyes for a moment, remembering Earth. He saw the faces of his friends, the smile of the girl he once loved, the blue skies of home. Those memories gave him strength. If Zyra thought she could break him, she was wrong. But deep inside, a question burned. Why had she kept him alive? She had the power to kill him the moment he was captured. Yet here he was, still breathing. What game was she playing? The next day, Zyra came again. This time she did not laugh immediately. She circled him like a predator studying its prey. "Tell me, human," she asked, her voice soft but dangerous. "Would you die for love? Would you throw away your life for someone else?" Ethan raised his head, his voice firm. "Yes," he said without hesitation. Zyra's eyes narrowed. "Foolish," she whispered, but there was no laughter in her tone this time, only curiosity. She turned and walked away, her long robe flowing like a river of fire. Ethan watched her leave. He did not know what she wanted, but he knew one thing. This was only the beginning, and whatever she planned, he would not let her win. In the cold silence of his cell, Ethan made a promise to himself. He would show her what human love truly meant, even if it cost him everything. The chamber door opened with a low hiss. Ethan lifted his head, already knowing who it was. Zyra entered, her steps slow and deliberate. The alien princess carried herself with pride, her long robe glowing faintly as if woven from starlight. Her eyes locked on him like a predator testing its prey. "You survived the night," she said, her voice echoing inside his head. Most humans would have begged for mercy by now. Ethan's lips curved into a faint smile. Maybe you don't know humans as well as you think, he replied. Zyra tilted her head, amused by his stubbornness. Tell me, why do you keep speaking of this thing you call love? She asked, circling him like a hawk. Your kind fights wars, spills blood, suffers pain, all for this illusion, this weakness. She leaned closer, her silver eyes burning. Do you really believe love makes you strong? Ethan's voice was calm, but firm. Yes, he said. Love is what gives us strength. It's what keeps us alive when everything else is lost. He paused, meeting her stare without fear. Without love, we are nothing. For a moment, Zyra was silent. Her lips pressed together as though she was holding back laughter. Then she smiled, sharp and cruel. You speak as if your love can break chains, she said, as if it can fight armies or move planets. Her voice grew colder. But here, in my world, love means nothing. The guards standing nearby laughed, their voices like grinding metal. They enjoyed the game, watching their princess toy with a human. Ethan ignored them, his gaze fixed only on her. You're wrong, he said quietly. Someday you'll see. Zyra's eyes narrowed. There was no fear in him, only determination. She found herself unsettled, and she hated the feeling. Turning sharply, she motioned to the guards. Test him, she ordered. Let us see if human love can keep him alive. The chamber shifted, its walls glowing brighter. Strange machines rose from the floor, humming with alien power. Ethan was forced into a large arena-like hall, surrounded by dozens of Zyra soldiers. Each one carried weapons made of light, each one stronger than any human soldier he had ever faced. The princess watched from above, seated on a throne carved from crystal. Her voice rang through the chamber. Fight, human, she commanded. Show me how your love protects you. The soldiers attacked without mercy. Ethan dodged, blocked, and struggled against them. He was not as strong, not as fast, but he had something else. He had will. Every strike he made was fueled by memory. The faces of his friends, the warmth of the people he loved, the world he once called home. Pain shot through his body, but he refused to fall. Hours passed like minutes. His body bled, his breath grew heavy, but he kept standing. At last, the soldiers stepped back at Zyra's signal. Ethan stood in the center, bruised and broken, yet still alive. He raised his head toward the princess, his eyes blazing. Is that enough proof for you? He shouted, his voice echoing in the silent hall. For the first time, Zyra did not laugh. She leaned forward, studying him as though he were a puzzle she could not solve. There was no fear in him, only fire, and that fire unsettled her more than any weapon. You should have fallen, she whispered, almost to herself. No human should have lasted this long. Ethan wiped the blood from his lip. You don't understand us, he said. Love is not about winning or losing. It's about never giving up. Zyra's heart skipped, though she quickly hid it. She stood tall, her face cold again. You speak like a fool, she said sharply, but perhaps a fool worth studying. The guards dragged Ethan back to his crystal cell. His body was weak, but his spirit burned stronger than ever. Zyra watched him leave, her thoughts heavy and restless. She had laughed at human love, called it weakness, but now doubt had begun to creep in. Why did his words stay in her mind? Why did she feel a strange pull when she looked into his eyes? That night, as the alien palace slept, Zyra sat alone in her chamber. Her hand rested on her chest, her heart beating faster than it should. Foolish human, she whispered to the empty air. Why can't I stop thinking about you? And somewhere in the silence of his prison cell, Ethan whispered to himself. She doesn't understand yet, but she will. His eyes closed, but his spirit stayed awake. This was no longer just survival. It was the beginning of something far greater. Days passed inside the alien palace. Ethan's body carried wounds from endless tests, but his spirit refused to break. Every time he stumbled, he stood again. Every time the guards mocked him, He answered with silence or a steady glare. To him, giving up meant proving Zyra right, and that was something he would never allow. Zyra watched it all. At first, she found it amusing, a form of entertainment. But slowly, she began to feel something else, something she could not name. She found herself thinking of the human, even when she was not near him. His stubborn eyes haunted her thoughts like a riddle she could not solve. One evening, she ordered him to be brought into the training hall again. This time the guards carried not weapons of light, but living creatures, beasts with sharp teeth and glowing scales. The creatures snarled, pulling against their chains, hungry for blood. The guards laughed, expecting the human to panic. But Ethan only straightened his back, his hands clenched tight. When the beasts were released, chaos filled the hall. Claws slashed, jaws snapped, the ground shook under their weight. Ethan fought with every ounce of strength left in his body. He was not faster than them, not stronger, but he was smarter. He dodged, used the walls, grabbed broken chains, and turned them into weapons. He fought not only to live, but because he knew Zyra was watching. The battle ended with Ethan standing bloody and exhausted, the creatures defeated at his feet. The guards were stunned into silence. Zyra rose slowly from her throne, her eyes fixed on him. "You should be dead," she said softly. "No human should have survived that." Ethan spat blood onto the ground. "Maybe love is what keeps me alive," he said, his voice ragged. Zyra's chest tightened, though she did not understand why. She dismissed the guards and stepped closer to him, her eyes narrowing. "You fight like one who has nothing left to lose," she whispered. Ethan shook his head. "No, I fight because I have everything to protect, even if it's far from here." Something inside her shifted at those words. Zyra turned quickly, leaving the hall, but her heart beat faster than before. That night, she could not sleep. The sound of his voice echoed in her mind. The image of him standing against impossible odds replayed again and again. The next day, against her own rules, she went to his cell alone. No guards, no audience, only her and the human. Ethan was sitting on the floor, his back against the crystal wall, his eyes half closed. When he saw her, he forced himself to stand, refusing to appear weak before her. "Why are you here?" he asked. Zyra did not answer right away. She studied him silently, noticing the bruises, the blood, the scars. For the first time, she did not see a prisoner. She saw someone unbreakable. Finally, she said, "Why risk your life again and again? What is it you hope to prove?" Ethan's answer was simple, that humans don't give up on what they love. His voice was steady, even gentle. "It's easy to fight for yourself, but true strength is fighting for someone else." Zyra's throat tightened. She wanted to laugh, to mock him again, but the words would not come. Instead, she felt something unfamiliar, curiosity mixed with a strange warmth. Her chest felt heavy, her mind restless. Why did his words matter to her? She turned sharply, hiding her face. "You are a fool," she said, her voice harsher than she meant. "Yet a fool unlike any I have met." Ethan smiled faintly. Even his pain burned in his body. "If believing in love makes me a fool, then I will always be one," he said. Her heart skipped, and she hated herself for it. Without another word, she left the cell, her steps quick, as though running from her own feelings. But as the palace grew silent that night, Zyra found herself returning in secret. She stood outside his cell, unseen, just listening to the human breathe. And for the first time in her life, the alien princess who once mocked human love began to wonder. What if he was right? What if love was not weakness, but something far greater? The alien palace never slept. Its crystal towers glowed like frozen lightning, and the corridors hummed with the sound of alien machines. But tonight, the hum was broken by alarms, sharp and urgent. The walls shook as explosions thundered outside. An enemy force had breached the outer gates. Ethan felt it first in his cell, the ground trembling under his feet. Guards rushed past his door, shouting in their strange tongue. The palace was under attack. For a moment, he thought this was his chance to escape. But then he heard a scream. not of fear, but of anger, a voice he now knew well. Zyra. The door to his cell burst open, two guards dragging him out. But before they could take him away, a blast of fire tore through the corridor. The walls cracked, and the guards fell in flames. Ethan stumbled free, coughing through the smoke. He should have run, but his eyes turned toward the sound of battle. In the great hall, Zyra fought like a storm. Her body glowed with alien power, each movement sharp as lightning. Yet even she was surrounded, her enemies pressing closer. Ethan's instinct screamed at him to stay back. This was not his fight, but something stronger pulled at him. He ran forward, grabbing a fallen guard's weapon. He threw himself between Zyra and the attackers. Zyra froze for half a second, shocked. The human, her prisoner, her fool, was standing in front of her, shielding her with his broken body. She shouted, "What are you doing?" Ethan's voice was rough, breathless. "Protecting you." The enemies struck, and Ethan fought with all he had. His arms shook, his body screamed with pain, but he did not step aside. Every time a blade of light came near Zyra, he blocked it, even as his own blood spilled. Zyra's chest burned with a feeling she could not name. The man she had mocked, the man she had called weak, was fighting for her. Not for freedom, not for himself, but for her. Together, they pushed the attackers back. Zyra unleashed her full power, her hands blazing with energy. But her eyes never left Ethan. She saw him stumble, saw him bleed, and something inside her broke. When the last enemy fell, silence filled the hall. Zyra turned to him, her breath fast, her heart racing. "You fool," she whispered, catching his arm before he collapsed. "You should have run. You should have saved yourself." Ethan gave a faint smile, his lips stained with blood. "I don't run from the people I care about," he said. Those words struck deeper than any weapon. For the first time in her life, Zyra felt weak. Not because of battle, but because of the storm inside her chest. She lowered him gently to the floor, her hands trembling. "You risked your life for me," she said, almost in disbelief. "Why?" Ethan looked into her silver eyes. "Because that's what love is," he whispered. "It's not about laughing or mocking. It's about choosing someone, even when it hurts." Zyra's breath caught. The word she had once ridiculed now felt heavy, real, dangerous. Her people would never forgive her for this moment. An alien princess, touched by a human prisoner, feeling something forbidden. Yet she could not deny it. She leaned closer, her voice shaking. "You are changing me, human," she whispered. "I do not know if I hate it or—" Her words trailed off, unfinished. She pulled back quickly, fear flickering in her eyes. The doors burst open, more guards rushing inside. They froze at the sight, Ethan leaning against Zyra, her hand still on his chest. The room filled with uneasy silence. Zyra stood tall again, her face hard. "Take him back to his cell," she ordered coldly. But her voice cracked at the edges, and her fingers lingered a moment too long before she let go. As the guards dragged Ethan away, Zyra turned her back to them. Her heart beat wildly, her mind spinning. She had broken the first rule of her empire. Never show weakness. Never let a human matter. But tonight, in the fire and blood, she had felt it. The forbidden moment when love slipped past her walls. And in the shadows of his cell, Ethan whispered to himself, "She's beginning to understand." Even in chains, even in pain, he smiled, because he knew the bond between them had already begun. The palace returned to silence after the attack, but silence could not erase what had happened in the great hall. The guards whispered behind closed doors, the council murmured in fear, and Zyra, once untouchable, once unshaken, now carried a secret no one could see. She had felt it, that dangerous pull toward the human. His blood had spilled for her. His body had shielded hers. It should have been nothing. It should have meant nothing. But at night, when the halls were empty, she found herself standing outside his crystal cell. Watching, listening, waiting. Ethan noticed it first. At odd hours, the princess would appear with no guards. her eyes softer, her voice lower. At first she said little, just questions sharp but curious. Why did you not run? Why risk your life for someone who mocked you? Why keep speaking of love when it only brings pain? Ethan answered simply, never with anger. Because love is not weakness, he said. It's the reason we stand, the reason we fight, the reason we keep going even when everything else is lost. Sometimes she laughed at his answers, but the laughter no longer felt cruel. It was softer, almost nervous. And sometimes she did not laugh at all, only listened, her silver eyes unreadable. Days turned into weeks. The princess's visits grew longer, her questions deeper. She wanted to know about Earth, about families, about the feeling of holding someone you cared for. Ethan spoke of sunsets, of music, of laughter shared around fire. Things Zyra had never known in her cold palace of duty. And the more she listened, the more the wall inside her cracked. One night, when the palace was wrapped in darkness, Zyra slipped into his cell again. She carried no crown, no robe of fire, only a cloak that hid her face. She sat across from him, closer than ever before. "Tell me, human," she whispered, her voice unsteady. "Do you hate me?" Ethan's eyes widened. He saw something in her expression, uncertainty, almost fear. "No," he said gently. "I don't hate you, Zyra." Her breath caught at the sound of her name on his lips. No prisoner had ever dared to say it. No one had ever spoken it with such warmth. "Why?" she pressed, her voice trembling. "After everything I've done, after every wound, every test, why do you not hate me?" Ethan smiled faintly, though pain still lingered in his body. "Because love is not about keeping score," he said. "It's about seeing someone, even when they try to hide behind walls." For the first time, Zyra could not look at him. Her chest tightened, her hands shook. She whispered, almost to herself, "You are dangerous, human, not because of your strength, but because of what you make me feel." From that night forward, their meetings became a secret rhythm. She would come when the palace slept, and they would speak in hushed tones. She told him things she had never told anyone, about her childhood, her father's iron rule, her people's hatred of weakness. Ethan listened, never judging, never mocking, only seeing her as she was. And in return, she listened to him about Earth, about hope, about love. But secrets cannot stay hidden forever. One evening, as Zyra left his cell, she caught the eyes of a guard standing in the shadows. The guard bowed quickly, but fear rippled through her. If the council discovered her secret visits, Ethan would be executed, and she would lose everything. Still, she could not stop. Every step away from him felt heavier than chains. Back in her chamber, Zyra stood before the mirror, her reflection cold and regal. But she no longer recognized herself. The princess who once mocked human love was gone. In her place stood a woman who longed for it, who feared it, and who could not let it go. Meanwhile, in his cell, Ethan whispered into the silence. "She's changing," he said to himself. "She doesn't know it yet, but her heart is learning." He closed his eyes, a faint smile touching his lips. This was no longer just survival. It was the birth of something forbidden, something that could destroy them both, or save them. The days inside the alien palace grew heavier. Whispers followed Zyra wherever she walked, though no one dared speak openly. She felt eyes on her back, suspicion hiding in the silence. But none of that mattered as much as the storm rising inside her own body. It began with weakness, a strange trembling in her hands, a heat in her chest. At first she thought it was exhaustion from endless battles and council meetings. But then the weakness returned again and again. And with it came a new fear, one she could not name. Late one night, she summoned the palace healers. They ran their instruments across her skin, their eyes glowing with unreadable light. When they finished, they bowed low, their voices heavy. "Princess," one said carefully, "you carry life within you." Zyra froze. Her body went cold, her mind blank. "That is not possible," she whispered. Her people's laws, their history, everything she knew said this could not happen. A union between her kind and a human was not only forbidden, it was unthinkable. And yet, the impossible had already taken root inside her. When the healers left, Zyra stood alone. Her hands trembled as they touched her stomach. A child that should not exist, a child born not of her empire's will, but of her secret bond with Ethan. She paced her chamber like a trapped animal. Memories flooded back. The way Ethan had thrown himself in front of her enemies. The way he spoke of love without fear. The way he looked at her as if she was more than a crown. And now, his love lived inside her. The thought terrified her. The thought warmed her. The next night, she could not stay away. She entered Ethan's cell, her cloak wrapped tight, her face pale. Ethan rose when he saw her, concern in his eyes. "What's wrong?" he asked softly. Zyra did not speak at first, her lips trembling with words too heavy to form. Finally, she whispered, "Ethan, I carry your child." The words fell like thunder in the small chamber. Ethan's eyes widened, shock breaking through his calm. He stepped closer, searching her face. "Are you certain?" Zyra nodded, her eyes shining with fear. "The healers confirmed it," she said, her voice shaking. "This is forbidden, Ethan, more than forbidden. If my people discover the truth, they will kill you. And me." For a long moment, silence filled the cell. Ethan looked at her, not as a princess, not as an alien ruler, but as someone carrying a piece of him. Slowly, he reached out, placing his hand gently on hers. "Then we protect it," he said firmly. "This life, it's proof, Zyra, proof that love is not weakness, proof that it can exist even between worlds." Her breath caught, tears burning at the edge of her eyes. No one in her empire had ever dared to speak to her like this. No one had ever stood beside her in this way. She wanted to believe him, to hold onto his strength. But fear clawed at her heart. "You don't understand," she whispered. "My father, the king, he will see this child as a crime, as a threat to the empire. The council will demand blood. I will lose my throne, my people, everything I was born to rule." Ethan's grip tightened on her hand. "Then choose what matters most," he said gently. "Your throne or your heart." Zyra's chest ached. She had been raised to believe the throne was everything. But when she looked into Ethan's eyes, she saw something greater than power. She saw the truth of what she had mocked. Love. She leaned against him, her forehead resting on his. "I don't know how to fight this war," she whispered, "but I know I cannot fight it alone." Ethan closed his eyes, holding her close despite the crystal walls. "Then we face it together," he said. Outside the cell, the palace remained unaware. The guards walked their rounds. The council planned their wars. But within those walls, a secret had been born. A secret that could shatter an empire or change the galaxy forever. And as Zyra lay awake that night, her hand resting on the small life within her, she finally understood why she could no longer laugh at human love. Because now, she carried it inside her, a living truth, fragile and unstoppable, a forbidden child of two worlds. The throne room of the alien empire had never been so heavy. Shadows fell across the tall, crystal pillars, and the air pulsed with anger. The council sat in a half circle, their eyes cold, their voices sharp. And on the throne, the alien king, Zyra's father, watched with a stare that could cut stone. Before them stood Zyra, her head held high, though her heart pounded in her chest. Behind her, two guards held Ethan in chains, his face bruised but his eyes unbroken. The council had discovered the secret. They knew of the forbidden bond. And worst of all, they knew of the child. The chamber echoed with the king's voice. "You have betrayed your blood, Zyra," he thundered. "You carry the spawn of a human, an enemy, a weakness that will poison our empire." His words struck like blades, but Zyra did not bow. Her hands trembled, yet she placed one over her stomach, protecting the life within her. The council roared, demanding punishment. Execute the human, one shouted. And the child before it grows, another cried. Their voices rose, filled with hate and fear. But Zyra lifted her hand, her voice cutting through the chaos. No, she said firmly, you will not touch him, and you will not touch my child. The chamber fell silent. Even the king froze, stunned by her defiance. Never before had the princess spoken against him. But now, with the weight of two worlds on her shoulders, she stood unshaken. The king rose from his throne, his presence towering. You would throw away your crown, your people, your destiny for this human? Zyra's voice trembled, but her words were clear. Yes, she said, because love is not weakness, Father, is strength, is why he still stands despite your chains. It is why I will fight, even if I stand alone. Ethan's chains rattled as he stepped forward. His voice was rough but steady. She doesn't stand alone, he said. If you call love weakness, then let us be weak together. But know this, your fear of love is the only true weakness here. The council hissed in rage. The king's hand rose, ready to give the order. Guards shifted, their weapons glowing. For a moment, it seemed the world would end in blood. But then something strange happened. From the far edges of the chamber, whispers began to rise. Not all the aliens looked at Zyra with hate. Some looked with doubt, others with wonder. A child born of two worlds, a crime, yes, but also a miracle, a symbol that the Empire's hatred was not unbreakable. The king's eyes flickered as he saw it. The doubt in his people, the shift in their gaze. If he struck down his daughter now, he might lose more than her. He might lose control of the Empire itself. Zyra stepped closer, her eyes locked on his. You can call me traitor, she said. You can strip me of my crown, but you cannot take away what I carry. This child is proof that your Empire's fear is a lie. Proof that love can cross even the stars. The king's jaw tightened, his fists clenched. Finally, he turned away, his voice cold. Then you are no daughter of mine, he said. Take your human, take your abomination, and leave this palace. You will never return. Gasps fill the hall. Zyra should have felt broken, cast out, defeated. But instead, she felt free. For the first time in her life, she had chosen her own path. Not the throne, not the Empire, but love. The guards released Ethan, pushing him toward her. He stumbled, but Zyra caught him, steadying his weight. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the whole chamber disappeared. It was only them, the princess and the prisoner. Two hearts bound by what everyone else had called weakness. As they walked out of the palace together, whispers followed them. Some in hatred, some in awe, but none could erase the truth. The child she carried was no longer just a secret. It was a promise. Outside, the sky burned with alien light. Ethan looked at Zyra, his hand tightening around hers. What now? He asked softly. Zyra's eyes turned to the horizon, fierce and unyielding. Now, she said, we fight not for thrones, not for crowns, but for our child, for love, and for a future that belongs to both our worlds. And with that, they stepped into the unknown. Exiles, rebels, lovers, carrying within them the most dangerous weapon the galaxy had ever seen. Not fire, not war, not steel, but love.